My name is Riley James. I'm 27 years old, and this is how I took revenge on the woman who crushed my passion and made me feel invisible. Since I was a kid, art was everything to me. I'd sketch on napkins during dinner, paint murals on the back walls of school, even design birthday cards for every neighbor on our block. It wasn't just something I did, it was who I was. But the day my mum ripped my paintings off the wall and threw them in the trash, something inside me broke. It happened just before our school's annual art showcase. My teacher had chosen my piece to go front and center. I remember feeling proud, hopeful, like maybe this was the start of something real. I came home beaming, ready to tell her the news. But instead, I found my canvases stacked in the kitchen garbage, slashed straight through with scissors. She didn't even look up from her magazine when she said, "You're not going to embarrass this family with that starving artist crap." I didn't argue, I didn't cry. Not in front of her, at least. I just stood there, staring at the pieces of my work, wondering if loving something that much could actually be wrong. That was the day I stopped calling my passion art. From that moment on, I started calling it a hobby, like a dirty word I wasn't allowed to say too loud. Asterisk. I grew up in a modest house in a quiet corner of Ohio. My mum, Denise, worked at a local insurance firm and lived by one unshakable principle: appearances are everything. She was practical to a fault, proud in a way that often came off as cold, and obsessed with how other people saw us. When my dad left us when I was 10, it was like she flipped a switch, and everything got tighter. The rules, the emotions, the finances. There wasn't room for softness in our house anymore. I was always the quiet one, the kid who loved colors and shapes, who'd rather get lost in a drawing than argue at the dinner table. But in our house, acceptable topics included grades, sports, or career goals involving law, medicine, or finance, art. That wasn't even a joke, it was a threat to her worldview. So I learned to hide. I kept my sketchbooks stuffed under my bed and entered contests behind her back. Every little brushstroke or inked line felt like rebellion. Then came high school, and Mr. Larkin, my art teacher, who saw something in me no one else had. He once told me, "You don't just draw things, Riley, you feel them. That's rare." I clung to that sentence like it was gospel, but every time I tried to bring that joy home, Mum would snap me back to reality. "Artists are just broke dreamers," she'd say, or "nobody pays bills with crayons." And the one that hurt most, you want to end up like your father, chasing nonsense and leaving messes behind. Her voice echoed in my head even as I filled sketchbooks in secret. When college applications rolled around, I knew better than to apply to any art school, not if I wanted peace in the house. So I chose the business college she approved of, one that made her beam with pride at the dinner table. I told myself, maybe I could survive it. Maybe I could fit into the mold just long enough to get out. But I lasted only 2 semesters. I remember walking across the parking lot after failing another accounting exam, feeling like I couldn't breathe. I dropped out that same week, and I never told her. Not then, not for a long time, asterisk. After dropping out, I moved to Chicago with 2 duffel bags, a second-hand coat, and a determination that felt both reckless and necessary. I crashed on a friend's couch for the first few weeks, then found a cramped apartment above a nail salon, where the heat clanged louder than it worked. I took night shifts at a quiet, dimly lit bookstore that paid just enough to keep the lights on and ramen stocked. During the day, I rented space in a shared studio a converted warehouse filled with other struggling artists who lived on caffeine and impossible dreams. The rent was brutal, the hours long, but for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. I painted every day. Large, messy canvases, abstract shapes, raw emotion. I poured into them everything I couldn't say aloud: grief, rage, loneliness, hunger, hope. I didn't sign them with my name. Instead, I created under the alias RJ. It felt like armor, a way to let my art exist without it being attached to the version of me my mother had tried to sculpt. Asterisk, I posted my work online. No face, no bio, just color and feeling. A small audience found me, then a slightly bigger one. People began sharing my pieces, screenshots, reposts, quiet thank yous in comment sections. One morning, I opened my email to find a message from an indie band I'd never heard of. They wanted to use one of my digital paintings, a deep blue swirl with jagged gold lines, for their upcoming album cover. I said yes. They credited RJ on every platform. The album took off. Suddenly, my inbox was flooded. Messages from fans, requests for commissions. A small but respected gallery in the West Loop offered me a solo show. It wasn't a blockbuster deal, but it was real. My name, or at least the one I chose, was finally being seen. I was overwhelmed and ecstatic, and despite everything, I still wanted to tell her. Somewhere deep inside, that little piece of me still hoped she'd be proud. I called her, told her I'd be showing my work in a real gallery, that people were buying it, writing about it. There was a pause. Then she said, "Don't embarrass yourself," just like that. 3 words that pulled the floor out from under me. No congratulations, no curiosity, no visit, just the cold, clipped tone of a woman who believed anything not tied to a paycheck or a degree was delusion. Asterisk, but the real gut punch came a week later at a family gathering I didn't attend. My cousin texted me, "Did you quit art or something? Your mum said you're working in retail while you figure things out." Asterisk, I stared at the message for a long time. Retail, figuring things out. As if I hadn't spent every hour of the last year building something from nothing. As if the gallery, the album cover, the sleepless nights meant nothing. It wasn't disappointment anymore. It was erasure. She wasn't just uninterested. In my art, she was actively pretending it didn't exist. I realized then that my success didn't just fail to impress her, it embarrassed her. She was ashamed of me. Ashamed that her daughter had chosen paint over a paycheck, risk over respectability. That's when the seed of something darker began to grow in me. This wasn't about winning her over anymore. This was about making her see me and forcing her to reckon with the reality she tried to bury. Asterisk. I poured everything I had into that gallery show. Every ounce of exhaustion, every bruise from lifting canvases, every self-doubt I'd learnt to silence. I slept on the floor of the studio most nights, using bundled-up hoodies as pillows, waking up with paint on my face and aches in my back. I worked 2 jobs, still at the bookstore in the evenings, and mornings at a cafe around the corner just to cover rent and stretch supplies. But none of it mattered. I was alive in a way I hadn't been in years. My art was coming together like it had a pulse of its own, bold, loud, unapologetically emotional. It was me on canvas, finally unfiltered. Asterisk, the night of the opening, the gallery buzzed with bodies and conversation. People spilled out onto the sidewalk, wine glasses in hand, pausing in front of my work like it meant something. A magazine critic I didn't even know was attending pulled me aside. "You've got Basquiat's Chaos with Kalos Heart," he said, scribbling in his notebook. I laughed, not because I thought I deserved it, but because I couldn't believe it was real. For a moment, everything felt surreal. I stood in a room full of strangers who saw value in something my own mother had discarded as worthless. Asterisk, heart racing, hands trembling, I stepped outside and dialed her number. I didn't even know what I wanted. Maybe just to hear her say she was proud. Maybe just to hear her voice. The phone rang until voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Instead, a few minutes later, my cousin sent me a photo from a family BBQ plastic tablecloths, paper plates, and my mother laughing beside my aunt, holding a soda can like nothing in the world had changed. They hadn't even known it was my opening night, or worse, they knew and didn't care. Asterisk, I broke down behind the gallery, crouched against the brick wall with my head in my hands, tears streaking through foundation and pride. It wasn't just sadness. It was a brutal recognition. I would never be enough for her. No amount of success would rewrite the script she'd written for me. But in that quiet, gutted moment, something inside me shifted. I stopped trying to make her proud. I stopped craving her approval like air. I wiped my face, stood up, and walked back inside, not as her daughter, but as an artist. Asterisk, from that night forward, I threw myself into building a brand. I leaned into the RJ identity, designed merch with pieces of my work printed on hoodies and notebooks, partnered with a local publisher to release a collection of visual poems and abstract prints. More shows followed, small cities, then bigger ones. I painted live at pop-ups, collaborated with indie musicians, even did a cover for a poetry magazine. I was still tired, still scared half the time, but for the first time, I felt whole, like I was living the life I was meant to live, not the one my mother had dictated for me. Asterisk, then came the email. A producer from a national morning show had seen my work online and wanted to feature me in a segment about young creatives redefining modern art. It was the kind of opportunity you dream about but never believe will actually come. I read the email 3 times to make sure it wasn't a scam. They were flying me out, paying for my hotel, and giving me 7 minutes on air. 7 minutes to tell my story, to show my work to millions. And that's when she called. Her name lit up on my phone like a ghost. I almost didn't answer. I hadn't heard her voice in years. But curiosity won. I picked up. "Hello," I said, wary. Asterisk, she didn't even pause. "Your cousin said you're doing some painting thing on TV." Her tone was light, like we spoke all the time. "I'm just glad you're finally doing something respectable." Respectable. The word lodged in my throat like glass. After everything, the years of silence, the shredded canvases, the lies to the family, this was her way of re-entering my life. Not with an apology, not with a question about how I was doing, just a backhanded compliment that erased the years I'd clawed my way through darkness to get here. Asterisk, that was the moment I made my decision. If she wanted recognition, if she wanted something to brag about at BBQs and insurance office lunches, fine. I'd give it to her, but on my terms. She didn't get to rewrite my story. She didn't get to swoop in now and act like part of the journey. If she wanted to be part of the success, she would have to see every inch of the struggle. I wouldn't just show the world what I'd built. I'd show her exactly what she tried to destroy. Asterisk. When I walked onto that national TV set, the lights were blinding, the cameras everywhere, but I kept my posture straight and my voice steady. I smiled, nodded, even laughed when prompted, but everything I said was deliberate. I wasn't there just to promote art. I was there to reclaim my story. As they rolled footage of my work, the chaotic strokes, the fractured portraits, the vibrant explosions of color and pain, I spoke calmly about what it had cost to get there. I said I grew up in a home where art wasn't allowed. I described how passion was seen as rebellion and how expression was punished instead of nurtured. Every word was measured, every sentence carefully wrapped around the truth I had carried for so long. The host leaned in, eyes sympathetic, and asked gently, if you could say one thing to that person now, the one who didn't believe in you, what would it be? Asterisk, I paused just long enough to feel the silence. Then I looked straight into the camera and said, thank you. You taught me to fight for my voice because you never let me use it. Asterisk, there was a beat of stunned quiet before the host nodded, visibly moved. But I didn't say more. I didn't need to. That line was my revenge. Quiet, poetic, public. Asterisk, the segment aired the next morning. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. RJ was trending across platforms. People shared quotes, screen recordings, stitched videos of their own art journeys set to my words. The gallery sold out in a day. I was flooded with interview requests, podcast invites, and offers to collaborate. Asterisk, and then came the twist. My mother, she started telling people I was inspirational. She reposted the clip on Facebook with a caption that said, "That's my daughter." She tagged me in stories, used hashtags like #ProudMum and #ArtQueen. The same woman who once threw my canvases in the trash was now showing off my TV interview, like a badge of honor. Asterisk, at first, I was furious. The audacity of it all, that she could publicly lay claim to a success she had fought so hard to crush in private. That she could pose like a proud parent after years of silence, shame, and emotional bruises. I wanted to scream. I wanted to block her, to comment back with screenshots of the cruel texts, the discarded sketchbooks, the phone calls never returned. But I didn't. Asterisk, I let her post. Let her smile for her curated audience. Let her bask in the reflection of a light she never helped kindle. Asterisk, because now she had no power. Asterisk, she could parade around with her fake pride. But she would always know the truth, that every compliment from a stranger, every like, every feature, was built on a foundation she once tried to bury, and now she had to watch from the sidelines as the world celebrated the child she never saw. Asterisk. Months later, my work was chosen for a prestigious traveling exhibit, a curated collection of modern artists whose pieces spoke to resilience, identity, and personal truth. One of the featured paintings was mine, a large, chaotic swirl of deep reds, muted blues, and violent streaks of gold. I'd titled it Unheard. It was raw, jagged, and uncomfortably honest, a visual echo of what it felt like to grow up silenced in my own home. When I learned the exhibit would stop, at a gallery just 30 minutes from where I'd grown up, I hesitated. That city still felt like a wound. But then I realized this wasn't a return to the past. It was a reclamation of it. So I sent her an invitation. No long message, no emotional bait. Just a formal invite with the date, time, and address. Asterisk, she came. Asterisk, she walked in late, wearing a stiff grey suit that didn't belong in the relaxed hum of the gallery. Her heels clicked too loudly on the floor, her eyes scanning the room like she was bracing for judgment. But no one noticed her. They were too busy looking at the art, at mine, She made her way to the piece unheard and stopped. For 10 full minutes, she stood there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She didn't speak, just stared, and I stood across the room, watching the woman who once tossed my dreams into a trash bag now silently face what those dreams had become. Finally. She walked over. She wasn't angry. She wasn't smug. She looked hollow, like someone who'd opened a door expecting to find a mirror, but saw something else entirely. She stopped in front of me and said, "I didn't know you felt like this." Her voice was low, almost shaky. I looked at her, really looked at her, and answered simply, "You never asked." That was the first time I saw her eyes well with tears. In all of my adult life, I'd never seen her cry. Not when Dad left, not when I moved out, not when I stopped calling. But now, standing in front of a painting that screamed everything I'd once kept hidden, she cracked. Her lips parted, like she wanted to say more, to ask for forgiveness, to explain, to make it better. But I didn't give her that out. I didn't hug her. I didn't rescue her from the discomfort. I let the silence sit. Because this wasn't about her anymore. This was about me finally being seen, not just as an artist, but as a person. This was about the little kid who used to hide sketchbooks under their bed, finally standing in the open, bold and unafraid. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything. I didn't need her approval, her apology, or her pride. I already had what mattered, my voice, my truth, and a world that was finally listening. Today, my mum keeps a framed print of Unheard in her living room. It hangs above the mantel, scented like some long-lost heirloom she's proud to show off. When guests come over, she points to it and says, "My child painted that. There." A big deal now. They nod politely, sometimes impressed, sometimes indifferent. But what they don't know is that I painted that piece in tears, alone on the studio floor, the night she called me a nobody. Her voice flat, her words sharp enough to cut through skin. They don't know that every brushstroke in that chaotic swirl was a wound trying to heal, or that the gold streaks were never meant to shine. They were scars, painted loud. Now. She brags on national TV interviews, posts my articles with captions, like so proud of my baby, and smiles beside me at events as if she's been in my corner all along. And I smile too, for the cameras, for the sponsors, for the illusion that we are whole. But inside, I remember everything, the ripped canvases, the trash bags, the way silence felt louder than screaming. I remember being 17 and hiding under the covers, holding my sketchbook like it was a secret sin. I used to want her to love my art. I used to crave it, the validation, the pride, the warmth I thought would finally fill the hollow space in me. But now I don't need it. I don't make art for her anymore. I make it for the kids like me, the ones who whisper their dreams into the dark, who sketch between classes and hide their pages from watchful eyes. I want them to know, you don't need permission to be seen. You don't need applause to matter, and that's my revenge, not her approval, not the success, but the truth that I built something powerful from the very thing she tried to destroy. That the voice she tried to silence now speaks louder than ever, and not just for me, but for all of us.